I read 21 books in the month of February, and I can't wait to tell you all about them and my thoughts about each book I read. I will put some stats about my reading for the month over here for you to check out. As always, keep in mind that one, I'm a professor, I have a really flexible job. I also live alone, so I'm very easily able to listen to audiobooks throughout the day, and I am just very lucky to be a person who reads very fast. I by no means think that this is a normal number of books to read, but I really enjoy reading, and so I do quite a bit of it. I'm just gonna go chronologically through the month. I have my reading list tracker bookmark that I got from my local indie bookstore, and so this is how I track what I read, when I finished it, and how many stars I gave it throughout the month. My first read of February was an audiobook copy of Unromance from Discover Publishing. This was a very fun contemporary romance. Typically, I am not really that interested in he's a TV star and she's a famous author. However, it was done well and they had full and interesting personalities outside of being people with very good careers. So I ended up giving this 4.5 stars, and I would definitely recommend it if you enjoy contemporary romance. My friend Kelsey recommended that I read Pew, so I did pick this up from my local library. This is a story about a young person who is found in a church, and they are not aware of how old this person is, their name, their race, their gender, and they are at least selectively mute and are not speaking to the adults in this church. And we get to see how they experience this interaction. I think it is really interesting to see how insular this church community is, and how not only do they feel really comfortable deciding what this person needs, but also feel comfortable just taking them into people's homes without seeking any sort of external support, resource, guidance, any of the above. This was a fascinating book. When I got to the end, I don't really know that I knew what happened, but I was glad that I had read it, and it is something that I have continued to think about, so I would recommend checking it out as well. I did pick up The Wood at Midwinter by Susanna Clarke from my library. This was just okay, it wasn't bad. I will warn you that it's more of a middle gradesy type book. It's illustrated, it's much shorter than I expected, and the plot is pretty simple. I didn't dislike it. It was really nice for curling up in bed for one night, but it wasn't as full of a reading experience as I had necessarily hoped for. I also listened to an audio arc of Boys with Sharp Teeth, and if I had read this when I was 18, I would have thought it was the coolest, edgiest book I had ever read. I would have eaten it up. At 31, it was okay. But if you have a YA reader in your life who wants to read something that is horror or thriller or dark, I definitely think that this could be a good option for them. I finished rereading The Mockingjay by Suzanne Collins for both my Hunger Games book club and the Hunger Games and Society course I am teaching at the university that I work at. This, I actually think, so far is the best of her books. It is so high action, and I often critique books that come in a series after a trials or a games, because I think very infrequently does an author maintain their momentum once that element is no longer in play. And I actually, after having read Mockingjay, feel like the games and the arena might have been holding her back, because this was a great book that asked so many questions. I absolutely ate up Bingsu for Two, which is the story of a bingsu and coffee shop there's a franchise and a mom and pop shop. In listening to this audiobook, I learned a lot about bingsu and this dessert that I'm now really obsessed with trying. There was a lot about fandom that I thought was done in a really interesting way. And if you have a young person in your life who wants to read books like Icebreaker that have romance, I would direct them toward a book like this. It's totally YA appropriate, but still has a romantic element and is funny and light and beautifully written. Another YA read for this month was Lobizona, which was phenomenal. This is the story of a young girl who is kept at home with her mom Her eyes are different than the eyes of other kids. They are star-shaped pupils and they're unusual colors. And she experiences a condition every month called lunaritis. She and her mom are also undocumented and in the US, and her whole world changes when ICE is called and they take her mom. This is not only a really great story of an immigrant experience but set in a fictional setting, it also is just a really high action YA book. I loved it and I'm currently reading the sequel as I record this today. I was sent a physical copy of You Between the Lines from Discover, and I really enjoyed reading the story of two rivals in a creative writing program. They were teenage rivals, now they are getting to know each other once again. There are moments in this book where the characters might be a little bit pretentious, but like, they're creative writers in an MFA program. Like, what else do you want from them, you know? But I really enjoyed getting to know the characters and getting to know their like creative work throughout the story. I had a really good time reading it, and I definitely think it's like a fun like spring or like just back to school read. Another Discover romance book, The Broposal. I listened to this as an audiobook. This is about two best friends, one of whom is undocumented, the other is an out gay man who is trying drag for the first time, and their friendship becomes a little marriage of convenience. I found this story to be beautiful and endearing, and I think it does an absolutely phenomenal job of navigating men expressing really deep and like gritty feelings and figuring out how to do that even with like societal and cultural pressure. I also thought it did a really good job of talking about the experience of being an undocumented person and trying to become like a legally documented immigrant. I just thought every bit of this was done phenomenally well. On Valentine's Day, I read Deadlines and Valentines, which is a cozy-ish murder mystery set in a small town during a romance author conference, I guess, and some of the authors start dropping like flies. This was fun. I will say the authors were not painted as very nice people. But it was so much fun to read, and I will definitely be checking out this author, especially if they do other holiday themed romances in the future. I was beyond honored and thrilled to receive a copy of The Strawberry Patch Pancake House from HarperCollins. It is the newest book in the Dream Harbor series. I read it in I think one day and I absolutely loved it. I have a full review and it is also in my books I acquired this month video. I listened to an audio arc of Thaumaturgic Tapas. This is a really immersive slice of life novella about a magical chef in a magical restaurant called The Nameless Restaurant. Turns out that this is a couple of novellas into the series. I didn't know it existed, but I will be reading them now because this audiobook was just so soothing and comforting, but it did make me hungry. Like, even more than Legends and Lattes made me want to go pick up a hot coffee, Thaumaturgic Tapas made me want to eat some like outstanding food. I, on a whim, picked up a graphic novel from my library called Ash's Cabin, and it turned out to be about a trans boy who was running away from home to find his grandfather's cabin and to practice self-sustainability in an attempt to find himself. There are some pretty heavy themes in this book, but I thought it was really beautifully illustrated, and I really enjoyed the storytelling. This illustrator has done a few other books, and I do plan to read them as well. I also read Get Lost with You, and the problem is that I was also reading Into the Woods, which is in a somewhat similar setting, and The Strawberry Patch Pancake House, which also had like a single parent thing going on, and both of those books just ranked higher for me. So Get Lost with You was fine. I do like the setting of a small town. I liked the extended family, but I only gave this book 4 stars. My friend Kelsey recommended that I read The Woods All Black, about a trans nurse who is trying to give vaccines in a rural part of Appalachia in a very religious small town. I cannot tell you anything about what's coming in this book, but I can say that if you read it, I'm gonna need you to message me the moment you hit the what the fuck part, because we need to debrief. I think I loved it. I also was confused. I read a graphic novel version of the history of the Black Panther Party. This was so informative. It was so well done. It was really easy to follow. And as someone who felt like I knew a lot about the Black Panther Party, I learned a lot of new things, and so I really appreciated that as well. I had seen a copy of Ban This Book in the Battle of the Books section at my library, and I like to know what kind of books are being recommended for that. And I was very pleasantly surprised by Ban This Book, which is the story of a bunch of middle schoolers who, when confronted with a parent trying to remove books from their library, create their own library of banned books. It was really well done, and I think it is a perfectly appropriate way to show middle school students what protest can look like for them. I listened to Compass Points by Jillian Witt on audiobook. I read this on my phone right when it first came out a few years ago, and I liked it. I think I gave it like 4.5 stars then, but having listened to the audiobook, I upped that rating to 4.75 stars. This is a really fun outdoor romantasy, and if you are looking for a book to read in the great outdoors, I could not more highly recommend Compass Points. I think I will forever be traumatized by having read Bloom by Delilah Dawson. My friend Kelsey recommended this to me, and at the beginning there is just this like insanely hot magical woman selling stuff at the farmer's market, and then things just keep getting weird, and I will never stop thinking about this book. If there are triggers that would make it really hard for you to read like a thriller, maybe you want to check the triggers for this book, but maybe you just want to pass then. I don't know. I love this. I think I'm going to think about this book for forever, but I also am traumatized by it. Like I mentioned earlier, I read Out of the Woods by Hannah Bonham Young. This is a really great romance from her, and it picks up in the middle of a relationship with a married couple who are starting to have some challenges, and I just thought that this was a really insightful way to look at a relationship dynamic. Because I read Out of the Woods, I only had one Hannah Bonham Young book left, so I also read Next of Kin. This was fine. It was my least favorite Hannah Bonham Young story to date, and that is largely because I needed more time for things to like happen at the end of the story for me to be able to really like the MMC. But I don't think it's bad, and if you like Hannah Bonham Young, you should read it as well. And the last of my reads for the month of February is The River Has Roots. I finished it this morning. It's by Amal El-Motar, who is one of the authors of This Is How You Lose the Time War. This is one of the most beautiful and lyrical novellas I have ever read. It is even more stunning as an audiobook. The production quality of the audiobook is out of this world. It's about two sisters, one of whom really loves murder ballads, and both of whom love to sing together, who live adjacent to a fairy world, and it is just immaculate. It's so good. It comes out in March, and I guarantee you'll want to check it out. I would love to hear about the books you've read in February. What were your favorites? Did you DNF any books in February? Are there any books that you would really love to hear me talk about in my March wrap-up? Let me know, and happy reading.